Honorable Minister, Member for Mico South, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, Public Service, Leader of Government Business.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sum shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund. Whereas as provided by Section 38(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that the Minister of Finance may, by resolution of Parliament, borrow money from a bank or other financial institution by means of advances to an amount not exceeding in the aggregate the sum specified in the resolution to meet current requirements, and as such, resolution shall not have effect for any period exceeding 6 months. And whereas it is further provided by Section 38(2) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, the power conferred on the Minister of Finance to borrow money by means of advances from a bank may be exercised by means of a fluctuating overdraft. And whereas it is further provided by Section 42(1) of the Finance Administration Act, Cap 1501, that all debt charges for which the government is liable shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance deems it necessary to borrow by means of advances from commercial banks sums not exceeding $55 million as follows. The Royal Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, EC $2.2 million. The Bank of Canada, EC $2.8 million. First Caribbean International Bank, 4 million EC dollars. Bank of Nova Scotia, 6 million EC dollars. First National Bank, St. Lucia Limited, 2.5 million. And the Bank of St. Lucia, $37.5 million. Be it resolved that the Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund. So, Madam Speaker, this is a standard document that comes to the House every 6 months. This does not constitute new borrowing. This is really the financing that is in place to be able to cover the government's overdraft facility. So it only is to help us with our cash flow exercise, and I hope it meets with the approval of the House, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund. Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow by means of advances sums not exceeding $55 million from commercial banks for a period of 6 months from the date hereof, which sums shall be charged upon and paid out of the consolidated fund. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Member for Mico South, Prime Minister, Minister for Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, Public Service, Leader of Government Business.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that the Honourable House of Assembly do adopt the report of the Standing Finance Committee on the estimates of expenditure for the financial year 2017-2018 in the sum of $1,513,652,200 as a charge against the Consolidation Fund and other funds of the State of St. Lucia. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this esteemed House now resolves to debate and approve government proposals for the revenue and expenditure estimates for the fiscal year 2017-2018. My presentation to this Honorable House will include brief summary of the 2016-17 performance and an outline of the budget proposals for the fiscal year 2017-2018. There was a marked improvement in the fiscal position of the central government, which was reflected in a narrowing of the fiscal deficit from a target of 3.2% of GDP in the budget to an estimated 1.4% of GDP. This performance was attributed to a reduction of $123,300,000 in total expenditure from a target of $1.426 billion to $1.302 billion for the year. Total revenue and grants also declined by $56.45 million to reach $1.107 billion. Based on these developments, the primary surplus improved significantly to reach 2.3% of GDP compared to a forecast of 1% of GDP in the 2016-2017. So it means, in essence, Madam Speaker, that we saw an improvement in the revenues versus the expenditures of the country. At $1.107 billion, total revenues and grants fell short of the approved estimate by $56.45 million, or 5%, primarily as a result of lower grant receipts recorded for the fiscal year. Recurrent revenue increased marginally by $4 million, or 0.4% of the approved estimates. Tax revenue recorded a $13.1 million surplus over its target of $945.7 million. This reflected robust performance in collections from the income tax collections, from corporations, excise tax on imports, and import duty and property tax. It's important for me at this point also, Madam Speaker, to really thank the staff of Inland Revenue, who continue to work in very mediocre conditions for this outstanding performance last year. This reflected robust performance in collections from both the income tax collections from the corporate excise tax on imports, import duty, and property tax. Collections from the non-tax revenue category stood at $91.9 million, falling short of the $8.2 million, or 8.3% compared to the projection of the fiscal year 2016-2017. The underperformance of this category was primarily as a result of the lower than anticipated receipts from the CIP, which was partially offset by the receipt of the payout from the catastrophic risk insurance facility. As you remember, we had Hurricane Matthew, and we were able to receive some $10 million. There was a similar decline in grant receipts as the amounts expected from the donor agencies did not materialize. Madam Speaker, it is worth noting that the increase in recurrent revenue was offset by a 44.8% shortfall in grant receipts resulting from a lower than anticipated disbursements from donor agencies and friendly governments. Preliminary data reveals that recurrent expenditure is estimated to have recorded an outturn of $1.088 billion, which is equivalent to 98.9% of the approved budget. Spending on all major categories remained broadly in line with the estimates, except for goods and services, which exceeded the budgeted amount by $1.8 million. In the case of wages and salaries, the total outlay on personal expenses was in line with the budget, although expenditure on pension obligations exceeded the approved estimates by $8 million. Spending on transfers was lower than budgeted, resulting in a saving of $10 million, of which $3.3 million was applied to settle outstanding liabilities to the OECS Drug Service for medical supplies. Total interest payments on public debt is estimated to have amounted to $165.7 million, which was $4.7 million below the projection from the year. This was primarily as a result of lower level of disbursements being made on some loans from multinational and bilateral agencies. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, the cause of that decline is because the thing that continues to cause us grief, which is the implementation of our capital programs. And some of the projects that were due to start did not start. And as a result of them not starting, we did not have to pay the debt for them. So while on one hand there is a savings, but it's something that we must be mindful of and we must pay attention to in terms of the implementation of our capital projects. Capital spending was again seriously affected by the delay in receipt of some grant funds, as well as delays in implementation of capital projects for various reasons. Overall, capital expenditure is estimated to have achieved a utilization rate of 65.9%. So that's the number that we have to focus on. And unfortunately, in the last couple of years, the best that we have done was about 72%. But on average, it has been between 66 and 65% of implementation. The 2016-17 budget, as at $214.9 million, capital expenditure was below budget by $111 million and $41.9 million lower than the outturn for the corresponding period in 2015. So what that means is that we were below budget by $111 million in terms of what was projected. But in relation to what the actual outturn was, we were only $41.9 million short. So again, this is a significant